Are you interested in the crucial junctures in American history that molded the modern world? Have you ever wondered how prior presidents' choices affected how wars and conflicts turned out? Take a trip back in time with us as we explore the lives of the top 10 American presidents and their noteworthy combat experiences. Every president, from the War on Terror to the Revolutionary War, faced different obstacles and made decisions that still have an impact today. So take a seat and get ready to learn about the interesting ways that diplomacy, warfare, and leadership intersected throughout American history. Number 10. George Washington, 1789 to 1797. George Washington, the nation's first president and a renowned founding father, distinguished himself during the Revolutionary War 1775 to 1783 and made a lasting impression on American history. In his role as the Continental Army's commander-in-chief, Washington overcame several obstacles, such as declining supplies and internal dissension, to win the war against the powerful British Army. At crucial junctures like the audacious crossing of the Delaware River and the winter camp at Valley Forge, his strategic acumen and steadfast resolve sustained his troops' morale and inspired a young nation. Washington's administration after the war served as a testament to his dedication to unity and governance, as he set important precedents and laid the groundwork for the modern American presidency. Washington's unwavering leadership helped bring America to independence and establish the democratic values that still guide the country today. Number 9. Abraham Lincoln, 1861 to 1865. Throughout the turbulent years of 1861 to 1865, Abraham Lincoln's administration was characterized by his unflinching dedication to upholding the Union and putting an end to the evil of slavery during the American Civil War. Lincoln's leadership was essential in managing the intricacies of a sharply divided nation as it teetered on the verge of disintegration. His status as one of America's greatest leaders was cemented by his unwavering commitment to the principles of freedom and equality, as well as his resolute opposition to secession. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, issued in 1863, marked a turning point in American history as it signified a serious change in the war's objective from merely preserving the Union to the outright abolition of slavery. Lincoln faced many obstacles during the war, including political resistance and military failures, yet he never wavered in his resolve to see the Union upheld. His strategic judgment, demonstrated by his choice of competent military commanders like Ulysses S. Grant and his deft management of the political intricacies of the time, was essential to the Union's victory. Lincoln's visionary leadership was tragically taken from the country by his assassination in 1865, but his reputation as the great emancipator and his significant influence on American history endure, providing hope and inspiration for future generations. Number 8. Woodrow Wilson, 1913 to 1921. Throughout his presidency 1913 to 1921, Woodrow Wilson made significant contributions to the First World War and worked to establish the post-war international order. Wilson placed a strong emphasis on diplomacy and neutrality in his first attempts to keep the U.S. out of the war. However, Wilson led the U.S. into the war in 1917 as German aggressiveness threatened American interests, and the war grew more intense, inspiring support from the public with his catchphrase, "Make the world safe for democracy." Wilson was president when he shaped the Allied war effort by promoting the ideas of collective security and self-determination found in his 14 points. His leadership helped the Allies win in the end and prepared the way for the League of Nations, which was founded before the United Nations and whose mission was to prevent future wars by means of diplomacy and international cooperation. Wilson's dream of a more equitable and peaceful world, however met with resistance both domestically and internationally, has endured and continues to shape international affairs today. Number 7. Franklin D. Roosevelt, 1933 to 1945. Especially during the Great Depression and World War II, Franklin D. Roosevelt's leadership amid some of the most turbulent periods in American history characterized his presidency, which lasted from 1933 to 1945. After being elected in the midst of the worst economic downturn, Franklin D. Roosevelt instituted the New Deal, a comprehensive set of social and economic reforms meant to lessen suffering and boost the country's economy. But his legacy was really solidified during World War II in his capacity as commander-in-chief. Roosevelt spearheaded America's entry into the war after the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, directing the country's industrial and military power to aid the Allies. In the end, the defeat of Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan was a result of the strategic alliances he successfully forged with the Soviet Union, Britain, and other Allied nations. Roosevelt overcame great obstacles and battled personal health issues, but his unwavering commitment and strong leadership are crucial in determining the direction of the war and guaranteeing the Allies' triumph. During his presidency, the federal government's function was radically altered and the U.S. position as a worldwide superpower was cemented. Number 6. Harry S. Truman, 1945 to 1953. Between 1945 to 1953, Harry S. Truman led the country with decisiveness during the last stages of World War II and the early Cold War. After Franklin D. Roosevelt passed away in April 1945, Harry S. Truman took over as president and was tasked with leading the country through the last few months of the war and the difficult post-war transition. A few months into his administration, he made one of his most important decisions. He approved the deployment of atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which resulted in Japan's capitulation and the end of World War II. Following the war, Truman remained to lead as he oversaw the Marshall Plan's reconstruction of Europe and the implementation of measures to stop the rise of communism. In order to advance peace and collective security in the post-war world, his administration also oversaw the founding of important organizations like the United Nations and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Truman's unwavering leadership and dedication to upholding democracy and freedom, in spite of opposition and controversy, had a long-lasting effect on U.S. foreign policy and ties with other countries. Number 5. Dwight D. Eisenhower, 1953 to 1961. During his tenure as president from 1953 to 1961, Dwight D. Eisenhower was known for his abilities to lead during the Cold War and his efforts to uphold peace and stability in a world where nuclear war loomed. During World War II, Eisenhower was a highly regarded military commander who brought to the Oval Office his diplomatic and strategic skills. Using both military might and diplomacy, Eisenhower's presidency was characterized by an emphasis on limiting communism and advancing American interests overseas. He advocated for peaceful cohabitation and armaments limitation while pursuing a policy of containment with the Soviet Union and its supporters. The creation of the interstate highway system, which promoted economic expansion and acted as a tactical advantage for national security, was one of his greatest accomplishments. The American Civil Rights Movement began during Eisenhower's presidency. Although he was criticized for his slow approach to desegregation, he eventually moved to uphold federal court decisions and advance civil rights legislation. Eisenhower led the country through a difficult time in its history, with steadfast leadership and a dedication to maintaining peace and prosperity during his 2 terms in office. Number 4. John F. Kennedy, 1961 to 1963. Between 1961 and 1963, John F. Kennedy's presidency was characterized by both optimism and unrest as he managed the challenges of the Cold War, the Civil Rights Movement, and growing tensions overseas. Kennedy, who was elected as the youngest president in American history, brought enthusiasm and youthful energy to the White House. His legendary inauguration speech, in which he said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country," is among his most memorable moments. Kennedy's leadership during the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis, a tense standoff between the U.S. and the USSR that put the world on the verge of nuclear disaster, marked his presidency. In the end, his deft diplomacy and calm handling of the situation prevented disaster and cemented his standing as a capable statesman on the international scene. Unfortunately, Kennedy's assassination in November 1963 sadly ended his presidency before many of his plans, such as his vision for space exploration and laws pertaining to civil rights, could come to pass. Kennedy's personality, vision, and lasting legacy continue to inspire generations of Americans despite his brief tenure in office. Number 3. Lyndon B. Johnson, 1963 to 1969. The years of Lyndon B. Johnson's administration, 1963 to 1969, were characterized by significant advancements in civil rights legislation and a significant shift in American history, including the intensification of the Vietnam War. After John F. Kennedy was tragically assassinated, Johnson took over as president and had the difficult challenge of bringing the nation together while negotiating the intricacies of the Cold War and the civil rights movement. Passing historic civil rights laws such as the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which sought to end segregation and increase voting rights for African Americans, was one of his greatest accomplishments. Nonetheless, Johnson's choice to deepen American engagement in the Vietnam War is likely what people remember most about his presidency, a move that would ultimately eclipse his accomplishments at home and drive a wedge in the country. Even though the war was initially successful, public opinion turned against it, sparking large-scale demonstrations and domestic political unrest. Considering the wide differences in the nation and the toll the Vietnam War had placed on his presidency, Johnson decided not to run for re-election in 1968. Notwithstanding his conflicting legacy, Johnson's administration was a turning point in American history for social and legislative reform, having a long-lasting effect on everything from healthcare and education to civil rights. Number 2. George H.W. Bush, 1989 to 1993. During his tenure as president from 1989 to 1993, George H.W. Bush led the world during a time of profound change, which included the conclusion of the Cold War and the Gulf War. Having held positions as vice president, director of the CIA, and ambassador to the UN, Bush brought a plethora of expertise in both local and international matters to his role as the 41st President of the United States. His handling of the Cold War's end, when he collaborated closely with Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev to handle the Soviet Union's breakup amicably and advance democracy in Eastern Europe, was one of his most noteworthy accomplishments. But his administration was distinguished by his leadership during the Gulf War in 1991. Bush put together a large coalition of countries to oppose Saddam Hussein's regime and free Kuwait from occupation in reaction to Iraq's invasion of the country. The prompt and decisive military action cemented Bush's standing as a capable commander-in-chief and demonstrated American might and resolve on the international scene. Bush had to deal with difficulties at home as well, including as a faltering economy and criticism over his choice to raise taxes as a means of reaching a budget agreement, despite his achievements in international affairs. Bush's administration was ultimately distinguished by his steadfast leadership at a period of significant upheaval, leaving a legacy of diplomacy, coalition building, and dedication to U.S. interests overseas. Number 1. George W. Bush 2001 to 2009. The September 11 terrorist attacks and the ensuing war on terror were among the major domestic and international issues that characterized George W. Bush's administration, which ran from 2001 to 2009. Early in his tenure as the 43rd President of the United States, Bush faced a pivotal moment when terrorists took control of 4 commercial aircraft, causing the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, as well as the World Trade Center in New York City to collapse. Bush responded by announcing a war on terror and launching military operations in Afghanistan with the goal of overthrowing the Taliban government and eliminating the al-Qaeda militants who were behind the attacks. Although it is still up for debate and controversy, the 2003 invasion of Iraq, which was justified on the lines of eradicating WMDs and advancing democracy, became another defining feature of his presidency. In addition to his efforts to advance freedom and democracy overseas, Bush's leadership during these dangerous times was marked by his steadfast resolve and devotion to defending the American people. In addition, his administration brought about a number of significant domestic programs like his tax cuts, the Medicare Prescription Drug Improvement and Modernization Act, and education reform through the No Child Left Behind Act. However, these measures were greeted with differing levels of praise and disapproval. Bush's administration had a profound effect on both home and international affairs, influencing the course of American politics and foreign policy for years to come, despite criticism over his management of the Iraq War and other initiatives. Subscribe now to dive deeper into the legacies of these influential American presidents and explore their pivotal roles in shaping the course of history through wars, diplomacy, and leadership.